Okay, so it's 1 o'clock, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. This is One Size Does Not Fit All, Designing Intentional Group Work. It is being recorded. Please, throughout the presentation, feel free to enter or to put questions in chat if they are pertinent. They will be included throughout the included into the conversation. And also they will, we're going to try to save about some time at the end for verbal questions. So I will hand it off. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. On behalf of the group of us, welcome to One Size Fits All, designing intentional group work. And thank you so very much for joining us today. We're very excited to share our experiences with group work and group activities with you. So the first thing, just before we do any introductions, is we have a short poll. If you look at the right side of the screen, you're welcome to use the QR code there or the link that just went into the chat to answer the following question. What is your top concern about using group work and/or group activities? We're going to come back to this in a little while later in the presentation. So first, we're going to introduce ourselves, and we want to tell you who we are and how group work shows up in our own work as instructional designers and/or instructors. So I'm Meryl Krieger. I'm Senior Learning Designer at the University of Pennsylvania School of Arts and Sciences on the online learning team. My team creates almost exclusively online and asynchronous courses at both the undergraduate and graduate levels. All of the undergraduate courses are 8 weeks and by design completely asynchronous with some optional synchronous components. And the students in that program are non-traditional adult learners with very few traditionally aged students, and less than half of them are based in the metro area of the university. So time zones are always an expected component of our curriculum and course design. I'm also an instructor in that undergraduate program I'll be talking about, though I'm not talking about my own courses today. Group work in our courses is not a formal part of the curriculum, but it is an essential component of how we see learning done throughout our courses.
Hi, everyone. My name is Linda Lee, and I'm the Technical Director of Instructional Design at the Wharton School. I lead a team of instructional designers, and we are part of a larger team supporting Canvas and related platforms for the Wharton School's degree programs and related initiatives. We support courses across 4 degree programs, which enroll more than 5,000 students each year, an undergraduate BS in economics, our flagship MBA program, our executive MBA degree program, and a PhD. Our courses are delivered across all modalities. Most are traditional in-person courses, but we're offering an increasing number of courses in an online format. And last year, we launched a global cohort for our executive MBA degree with a low residency requirement and courses offered across all modalities, with most courses offered in a remote synchronous format with about 30% of the contact hours provided asynchronously. Group work is an essential component of all of our degree programs, and it is literally part of the curriculum at the Wharton School. So I bring deep experience with designing and supporting group activities at scale, and I'm happy to share that with you today.
I am Esther Martin. I am the instructional designer for the Institute of Translational Medicine and Therapeutics at the Perelman School of Medicine. And while I support all of ITMAT Ed, I'm currently focused on switching the Masters of Regulatory Affairs and related programs from an in-person program to an online program. And the program is in their 3rd year of online work, and I have been asked to improve engagement and class content to better align with the expectations of an online master's degree. We run semester-long courses with asynchronous material and synchronous classes once a week. And previously, I worked at the Masters of Healthcare Innovation as a course coordinator with Adam, which is relevant, primarily managing courses during the runs of the courses and acting as a liaison between students, instructors, and TAs. I specialize mostly in creating online community and improving synchronous interactions, which is kind of where I think I've brought some expertise to the way that we do group work. I was always really hesitant to introduce something like that because of probably my own experiences, where everybody's had that undergrad experience where group work was a dumpster fire. But as I got more into instructional design and started learning more about these communities we were working with and exploring how to connect students and create empathy between them, it seemed like group work was another way to improve engagement and relationships. So I'm hoping we have some group work going now at the Masters of Regulatory Affairs, and I'm hoping to sort of continue to push them in that community-based group work style.
Cool. And I am Adam Zolkover. I am the Associate Director for Curriculum Design and Online Education for Penn's Master of Healthcare Innovation and related programs, as Esther had mentioned. We were designed from the ground up to be a fully online program serving mid-career healthcare professionals in clinical and non-clinical roles. Our faculty are highly interdisciplinary, with instructors from the schools of medicine, nursing, social work, law, and business, which means that we're designed to accommodate a wide variety of teaching styles while providing a coherent experience for students. As a program, we had initially shied away from group work because our students are from many time zones around the world, and because many of them have demanding and inflexible schedules like healthcare workers do. But in part because of student demand, we've systematically been experimenting with integrating group work into our curriculum for the past 3 years and have learned a lot of lessons that I'm hoping to share here today.
Okay, we want to begin by making a case for group work. We know that there can sometimes be resistance to group work, but group work is really invaluable because it allows students to work at a scope that no single student could accomplish alone. And group work has some really specific advantages. First, it promotes engagement. And Adam, okay, thank you. It promotes engagement. Students and instructors often don't have a clear distinction between engagement and participation. While participation refers to one type of engagement, it perhaps best describes students' behavioral compliance with course activities and requirements, while other types of engagement refer to students' affective and cognitive involvement with that, which influence both students' learning and satisfaction. Engagement can happen in many different ways. That doesn't really look like traditional raise your hand kind of participation that we are accustomed perhaps to seeing in in-person classes. Active listening, asynchronous feedback, and distance communication can all be forms of engagement. And group work in particular can promote engagement. It fosters participation, it encourages student sharing of both skills and knowledge, and it promotes student-led learning.
So the other argument for group work is building a community within your students. It gives the students an opportunity to interact with each other and sort of grows naturally out of engagement. Just by putting them in groups, they have to talk to each other, so builds a community. And so working together fosters a community, whether the students are aware of it or not. And one thing to take into consideration is that manufacturing the groups or having the students self-select the groups can determine the type of community you end up building. Regardless, though, students have something in common to work on, and there's an investment in what they're doing together and also an interdependency. So community is rowing in the same direction. Group work is rowing in the same direction.
Great. And the last why group work answer is demand. Like I said in my introduction, students, and especially students in online courses who are adults, have limited time. But many of them come into graduate programs, especially with the expectation that they're going to do group work as part of their classes. And when there isn't group work, they often feel like there's something missing. I know this because they've told me so. Especially because in addition to pedagogy, group work is really good as a networking opportunity, which is one reason why people go into graduate programs. So this is acknowledging something that we'll get back to a little bit later in the challenges section, that there are also students who are on the other end of the spectrum and really don't want to do group work, but there's enough demand for group work, certainly that we've heard in our programs over the years, that it's something that we felt like we needed to address. So I wanted to come back just briefly to your answers to the Poll Everywhere poll. And I hope that everybody can see the answers here, and I'm going to scroll through them. So the
Adam,
question was,
can you make
yeah,
that bigger? It's not
is it
taking up.
not?
It's only partially on your screen.
Hold on. That is,
That might be all we get. Okay.
yeah, that might be all we get. Isn't that fun? So welcome to Poll Everywhere. I just wanted to go through very briefly a couple of the answers that you had given on what you see as top concerns with group work. So this includes unequal contributions, group members not participating. I think that those are certainly related and certainly relatable. Wait, what? Okay. That just made things worse. One or two students are doing all of the work rather than it being a real group effort. Lack of participation. I'm seeing lots of lack of participation or unequal participation, and I'm hoping that that is something that we can talk about today, because I think that that has been a really big challenge for all of us who are presenting here. So we're going to talk a little bit about our concerns, which I think mirror the concerns that you've noted here. And then we're going to come back around to have a discussion at the end, I hope, in a way that will help you and in turn help us address some of this. And now my screen is, there we go. Okay. So, Meryl?
It would really help if I unmuted myself now, wouldn't it? Okay, so group work online is a process of overcoming challenges, but the outcomes of group work are really worth addressing, especially addressing these challenges intentionally and in advance. So we've broken it down into three main categories: challenges for students, challenges for instructors, and challenges for institutions. Looking specifically at the experience of students. Students have complex schedules, and we've all been talking a little bit about this. That can make group work difficult. I don't think I'm saying anything that anyone here doesn't know. These can be anything from parenting and work commitments to time zone differences.
Effective organization is essential. And Adam, can you advance?
Working on it.
Thank you. Effective organization of groups is really essential to group work, but it can be really problematic for online courses. This is a challenge. This can be a challenge when it comes to organizing groups. There can be confusion around how groups will be organized. Are instructors organizing them? Are students self-organizing groups themselves? If so, are there support structures in place to help them identify and contact group members without having the face-to-face component of a course where students can, grab someone at the end of class or the beginning of class, or, make eye contact and pass a note, right? The formation of groups can be much, much more complex. And either way, there's the additional overhead with groups for online courses that students need to navigate. The time that it takes to get to know one another, the time that it takes to physically get into groups or via Zoom get into groups. And also there's the perception that groups may be less flexible than they actually are. So there's often a perception that that there's only one way, or that students will have inflexible schedules. And that's often in practice not actually the case, but that can be a cognitive hurdle to overcome.
And finally, challenges to equitable participation. These can include anywhere from language barriers, which are at the surface, to are there sufficient resources available by the students, including this is going to affect things like their internet access, their economic status, their access to information. Are there other DEI-related issues? Students can come into group work with biases that they may not be aware of, about anything ranging from insecurities and imposter syndrome to race and gender. Students often also have insecurities, as we have kind of already been intimating about past bad experiences they've had that include, and you all referenced this in your responses to our survey, about inequitable division of labor.
And then the last student-centered concern that we wanted to raise is different ideas about what it means to have a culture of collaboration. There can be unarticulated expectations, both among students and instructors, about what this might mean. Students, especially those that we see at the Wharton School, may start from a premise that coursework is about competition rather than collaboration that can affect students' willingness and desire to collaborate. If students feel like the work that they're doing is benefiting someone else more than it's benefiting them, that can also be detrimental to getting students to collaborate effectively. And these concerns, one of the things that we found, can really be ameliorated by collaborative work that is collectively graded. So students who are working toward a goal where they're all going to be evaluated together, that can help.
So the instructor experience is also full of challenges, and they can be underestimated. Those challenges can be underestimated. But they can also be planned for in advance, and making an investment in doing that can help overcome a lot of those challenges. So one of the things instructors need to do is they have to think very carefully and intentionally about engineering a rewarding student experience during their group work. There is that perception that students hate group work and that it might color their perception of the course as a whole, affecting evaluations in particular. But that might not be true, which we've also sort of heard from students asking for group work. And the fact that the students may not have liked it in the past, it doesn't mean that they won't like it in your class. And actually, it may give you the opportunity to revise their feelings about group work as a whole, which is kind of exciting. But later on, when we talk about potential frameworks for doing group work, you'll notice that there's a lot of personal involvement from the instructor and the teaching team. And that can seem daunting, but it's crucial to the success of the assignment.
Another factor that faculty are concerned about is fairness to students. This includes equity within the class and whether students are doing an equal amount of work, whether there may be free riders who are not doing their fair share. Some faculty question whether it's fair for students to receive a grade that's based on someone else's work. And echoing a concern of students, faculty are concerned about the logistics of group membership. So these are all affect faculty's concerns around whether group work itself can be fair to students.
And building on Linda's point, academic honesty can be a concern for instructors as well. When there's more work that's being done outside of the instructor's view, there are more concerns about opportunities to cheat, to use LMM type AI, etc.
And one thing that we absolutely want to acknowledge is that managing groups is an advanced learning management system topic. I regularly talk with faculty who've had a bad experience using LMS tools to create and manage group assignments because they can be so easily misconfigured and go wrong. Problems with these tools can cause a lot of extra work to fix, and they can make faculty shy about using them again in the future, especially if faculty feel like when something's gone wrong, it reflects poorly on them. New tools especially can become a failure point if they're not well integrated into the LMS or when support teams are still developing expertise in those tools. And additionally, especially early in the semester, while they're still shifting enrollment in a course, group membership lags behind course enrollment. Newly enrolled students may not yet have a group if you're doing group work very early in the semester, as happens with some of our classes. And group membership might shift as students drop. So students who have a group may suddenly no longer have a group. And then underlying all of this is the need for adequate support. And this is a feature you'll see in all of our examples of well-designed group work, that they are all well supported.
finally, instructor workload can be unexpectedly challenging. Instructors, particularly those new to teaching in this in online settings in particular, but in general, frequently underestimate how much work teaching takes, and they often overestimate how much time they'll have available. In in-person classes, things can often be done more on the spur of the moment. So it's easy to underestimate the additional overhead of developing any kind of assignment, let alone a group assignment, intentionally and online. Effective feedback, and also frequently needing more time than expected, because asynchronous feedback can double the amount of time necessary for the instructor. So planning becomes super important. And one of the things that we will hopefully be able to dig into a little bit more is we're going to suggest that good rubrics can be one key component to this intentional and effective planning.
So the last set of challenges that we want to think about are challenges for institutions. Challenges for students and instructors sometimes align to those of institutions, but often they don't. And often institutional concerns are unique and separate. For example, are the tools that are included within an institution's technology ecosystem conducive to group work? Are they integrated into the LMS? Can students access them seamlessly through single sign-on? Or do they have to create a separate login with separate login credentials that they have to remember? Do your tools synchronize group membership from your learning management system? Or do you have to maintain group membership in separate systems? These are all questions. Faculty can sometimes make it challenging for institutions when they want to use a new or unsupported tool to facilitate group work in a course. This can mean that there are limitations for how well local support can help to support those tools. And there also can be concerns about whether groups will be able to seamlessly move into those third-party tools that you might want to use with your LMS if they're not centrally supported. And a related concern is around privacy and accessibility. Supported tools that are vetted by an institution have to meet certain privacy and accessibility requirements. And sometimes instructors who are really excited about trying out a new tool for their course purpose ignore that, which can put both students and institutions at risk.
So similarly, one of the challenges comes down to staffing and procurement of appropriate resources. Group work online requires more staff support than other kinds of online coursework and also other kinds of group work. There might not be a budget to do what you want to do with the tools that you'd optimally like to use. And there's a lot of free or unsupported tools out there that can seem really valuable. But as Linda mentioned, without that central support, there are risks to student privacy and thus to the institution in doing that.
So there are a lot of interests in a large institution like a university, and they might not always align. The needs of the curriculum might not be well understood at the institutional level. The institution might be purposely or accidentally, I think more often than not the latter, reinforcing values that are contrary to effective group work. And this can lead to downstream conflict among the different stakeholders. And by this, we're really talking about the instructors, other staff that support courses, and the students themselves.
And yet, despite these concerns, with intentional planning, online group work can be done, and it can be done well, and it brings value to online courses that can be highly worthwhile for students and difficult to get in any other way. What we would like to suggest here is a framework that brings intention to the design of online group work. It's not unique to the challenges of group work. For those of you familiar with other instructional design frameworks like ADDIE, this will be familiar. And to those of you who are familiar with practices of human-centered design, you're going to see that right away. But in this case, those principles can be leveraged to help instructors and instructional support staff get off the ground with group work at the level of a course, and optimally in a way that can be reused and scaled so that every exercise in online group work is not also an exercise in reinventing the wheel. For our purposes, assume that we're starting with a blank slate, a new group work project for an online course. And our framework starts with the articulation of principles, that group projects should be pedagogically valuable, They should forward learning objectives and program competencies in a way that's clear and well articulated to all stakeholders. That they should be an excellent experience, certainly for students, but also certainly for instructors. Ultimately for support staff as well, as their buy-in will be necessary for the project to be reusable and scalable, which is our next core value here, reusability and scalability. No matter the decisions that you make about implementation, the first iteration of a group project will be resource intensive. And so you want to you don't want to keep doing first iterations every time. Core design considerations should include how a model of group work can be reused, how it can be scaled, how the model can scale as the course scales, and you might consider how to do pilots with one section, with two sections, certainly not with 27 sections as we get toward a full-scale course. Next, clear project scope is essential here, starting with a sense of your desired endpoints to avoid scope creep is really important. And then you can always add on to a project in the future. We found that one of the key tools for doing group work is having some kind of project charter, whether that's formal or informal, so that everybody who's involved in the project knows where you're going and like knows when to stop. And then finally, considering your model for support is really important. So what external resources will you need to make the project work? Who will support the technologies that students are using? Can you consult with those people ahead of time so that you're not just springing it on them? And what's your communication plan? Keeping everybody from TAs to IT staff on the same page is really crucial to delivering an excellent group work experience. So those are the principles. And with those principles in mind, where we usually start is with a process of discovery. Don't assume that you know what makes an excellent experience for your stakeholders or what those endpoints are going to be. So discovery means being expansive in the stakeholders that you talk to. So instructors, support staff, students, people in your program with budgetary control are all people who you should be talking to when you're putting together a group work project. The point is to understand what their needs are. What do they see as the facets of the challenge? What does success look like for your stakeholders? And then building support and influence, right? And project ownership. So what do they need in order to feel like they are meaningful contributors and that they want to contribute to future iterations of a group work project? And then finally, how do we prioritize needs? How do we understand that not every idea can or should be implemented? Reading interactions with stakeholders through the lens of your starting principles is key here. Think, will this improve learning? Will this improve student experience? Can this be reasonably supported given institutional resources? And even if this seems resource intensive at first, can it be made sustainable as we scale? One thing that I've encountered a lot is the idea that folks come in with strong ideas about what group work should be, but oftentimes their ideas are more flexible than you think they are, and you might want to dig down into underlying priorities to find an experience that's satisfying for students, for learning objectives, etc.
When it comes to group work design itself, there are fundamentally two approaches that you might take. The first is a sort of minimum viable product approach. So select the ideas that you uncovered during the discovery phase that seem most essential to meeting the pedagogical goals and the most sustainable and least resource intensive. Design around that cluster of ideas and be prepared to expand your feature set in future iterations of the design. So this might, in practice, this might look something like basically just putting students into groups and having a place where they can submit, right? At the other end of the spectrum is being more expansive in approach in which you try to incorporate as many good ideas from your discovery process as possible. This might Try to collect feedback from students throughout the experience. Be prepared to throw a lot of resources at a project in its first iteration, and then use what you've learned to winnow, operationalize, and otherwise prioritize sustainability in future iterations. So try something and then expand as you figure out what really needs to happen, or try everything and winnow down to what is the most important. The try something approach might be the best option if your resources are limited or less flexible, or if you're already introducing a lot of other new into your course. This approach might take several iterations before you learn what's going to work best. And it might mean more trial and error in student-facing spaces during this time. If there's limited staff bandwidth to support your efforts, or if your teaching team or students are less technically savvy, you'll likely be more successful if you focus your initial efforts toward the ideas that you think will work best rather than trying to try everything. The try everything approach, in contrast, can yield really great results, but it might be a fight to get started. It's likely to require considerably more resources in its first iteration, but that can be balanced by getting to a really valuable and excellent experience faster, which means that the resources that you committed initially can be dialed down, possibly as soon as the second time that your project runs.
Regardless of which approach you follow, flexibility, especially but not only in that first iteration, is key. You want to approach this with a sense of humor. You want to get comfortable living with uncertainty because you don't know what you don't know, and there may be needs that you didn't plan for. Prep for problems as much as possible, but also recognize that stuff happens. Be prepared to keep a close eye on how the group work is unfolding, and be ready to pivot in response to unexpected student and instructor needs, or in response to feedback from support staff. Pay attention to good ideas wherever they may come from. If students want to do their work in a way that is different from you expected, go with it. It establishes you're dedicated to this experience being about them and not being prescriptive about what group work should be. And then also realize that maybe something you were committed to and thought would work really well might need to be dropped at a moment's notice. So sometimes something you planned for will just fade away as your groups connect with one another. But really, that's the point anyways, is to get them to build this community of group work, as well as getting them to engage in the content. So the first iteration can be hard, and there's an element of kill your darlings with it. But you can remind yourself that you can always make more darlings, and the best darlings are the ones that come from the students themselves.
Finally, be ready to iterate in response to what you learned. So, what went well? What was built into your first iteration of the project that might be unnecessary? What did you think that would work that might actually be a hindrance to students? This kind of thing happens all the time. It's not an idea that's original to this presentation, but we'd recommend a simple heuristic called stop, go, pivot to think this through. First, stop. An idea didn't work. It was a hindrance. It can't be made to fit into allocated resources, and it should be dropped for the next iteration. Go. The idea was great. Students and instructors loved it. It can be streamlined, it can be automated, and we should absolutely do it again. Pivot. We tried something, we learned some important lessons. Let's tweak it and give it a go another time, and let's see if we get better results. Now, as you do this, think specifically about the importance of sustainability and scale. You may never have as many resources as you do in that first run of a group work project, but in subsequent iterations, you may need to deploy it more widely. What can you do to plan for that scenario? Oftentimes, you'll have better questions that you already know how to ask based on what happened that first time. Finally, be specific about your next step. Again, we're talking about clarity of your endpoints, but we're also talking about new experiments. So what are you still curious about? What made you ask, what if we tried X? Is there something that happened that kind of jogs that particular question or that particular idea? And how can you run that experiment in a low-key kind of way in future iterations of the project?
So what we hope to show here is that successful group work is highly contextually dependent. The factors that we discussed earlier in the presentation, the challenges and needs of students, instructors, and the institution will influence the specific approach to group work that you adopt in courses. And as we've done in the last few slides, we can offer a framework for being intentional about that approach. But there's no one size fits all solution. So what we plan to do here is talk through 3 very different solutions that build on this intentional approach to design group work that meets diverse needs of diverse stakeholders.
At the Wharton School, group work is literally part of the curriculum. Our typical class size is about 75 students, and faculty usually teach multiple sections of a course in any given semester. So it's essential that we design groups and group activities that can readily scale to 200 or more students. I want to talk about 2 examples. First, the most typical group setup that we use across all our modalities, and second, the groups and group work for an undergrad gateway course. A typical Wharton course includes groups that persist for the semester and are used for group activities like case write-ups, problem set preparation, group projects. In our elective courses, students are usually allowed to form their own groups, which they sign up for on Canvas, our learning management system. This reduces the administrative overhead for faculty, so it absolves them of the need to actually organize those groups. We typically set up an ungraded assignment to provide a deadline for when students are supposed to join a group with enough time in advance of when the first submission happens for students to do that work. And we'll include a link in that assignment to where students can actually join. We encourage faculty to decide in advance how they'll handle any students who don't sign up for groups. So for instance, putting non-joiners into a separate group or randomly assigning non-joiners into available spaces in those groups. And students are held accountable for their participation through a group member evaluation process that allows students to give feedback to each other or to the faculty member, which can then optionally contribute to students' grades, either as part of their participation grade or a grade for the assignment. And because this approach is used across all of our courses and programs, students don't have to learn any new system, making it scale easily, not just within a single large course, but across the courses in our 4-degree programs. The second example I want to give is a gateway course for incoming undergraduates. Every fall, about 650 students enroll across 12 sections of a course, and students complete a semester-long project in groups of 10. This course is intentionally designed to be an intensive, transformative learning experience at the beginning of their time at Wharton. As a result, it's heavily supported to deliver a meaningful, successful learning experience. My team begins work with the teaching team at least 6 months in advance of when the class launches to discuss any upcoming changes, and we prototype and test all learning activities that are used in this course. The ability to use Canvas groups is a requirement for any third-party tools that we incorporate in this course, which we learned the hard way when we used a tool that did not support Canvas groups. There are 36 TAs in the course, each who work with 2 groups of 10 students in 2 different sections. So a TA will work with 1 group of 10 in one class, and 1 group of 10 in a different class. And the groups themselves are deliberately constructed by the teaching team to be diverse across multiple demographics. The teaching team reinforces the value of this group work by providing space for it both within and outside of the classroom. So TAs work with groups as part of each synchronous class session. And they also have multiple consultative meetings with groups outside of class time. And finally, students engage in both individual reflection and peer feedback activities to support their development of teamwork skills over the course of the semester that they're in this class.
I want to talk about a certificate program that we run in our undergraduate fully online degree program, which is our positive psychology certificate, which we give with the acronym APOP, which I won't get into the details of right now. But it's one of my favorite examples that demonstrates this process of creating clarity and consistency. And I think it builds really nicely on what Linda was just talking about. Across the 4 courses that students have to take to complete the APOP certificate, and these courses are rostered to allow completion within 1 calendar year. There is a heavy emphasis on peer learning and co-creation of knowledge through frequent small group assignments. The courses each enroll 25 to 50 students at any given time. They run 2 to 3 times a year. They're primarily asynchronous, but all of them offer optional synchronous elements. So a core goal is fostering an active learning community and meaningful connections between students, but it's mostly done in an asynchronous environment. To achieve this, group work activities feature a clear, consistent model with highly interactive, multimodal components and staggered due dates that accommodate different schedules, because again, our students are frequently across time zones. Assignments are clearly structured, yet varied. They include experiential activities, co-created projects, and applying concepts from readings and other materials. Evaluation of these group activities focuses on process and integrating concepts rather than predetermined right answers. So intentionally designed through extensive student support, this demonstrates clarity, providing detailed assignment guidance, rubrics that give defined outcomes that are designed by the instructors with the support of instructional designers, including yours truly, just-in-time documentation, which is developed by people across our operations and support team, as well as the instructional designers, and our faculty as well, based on prior experience. And this allows an alignment of activities with the overarching career goals and curricular goals across the entire certificate sequence. So the structured, clear, and consistent model for facilitated online group work creates an engaging collaborative experience tailored to adult learners' needs as they progress through what's generally a 1-year certificate, or many of our students also build this certificate into their Bachelor of Applied Arts and Sciences degree.
And I am going to be using an example to talk about designing for sustainable support. So the example that I'm working from is group work that Adam and I developed for a 6-week course called Value and Quality in Healthcare for the Masters of Healthcare Innovation. And the really important thing that I want to acknowledge first is that our team had a lot of resources that likely not many departments or instructors will have. We had 1 TA to every 10 students. We had group facilitators who were alumni providing support and feedback. And we also had me, the course coordinator, whose job was specifically to make sure everything ran relatively smoothly. Because the course was so short, we had to be very thorough and meticulous in our preparation, and it required a lot of extra work up front. So we discussed everything that could go wrong, things that could be exciting for students and us to try, and the best ways to minimize cognitive load for the students and the instructor. Some things we talked about ahead of time, just because of how brief the class was that we needed to emphasize from the get-go how important group work was. We spent time establishing how important this would be. We sent multiple reminders about scheduling meeting times, as well as explained the process to the students during their first synchronous class. So they actually heard from the support team as well. To further impart how important it was for the students to stay engaged, we created Slack channels within our MHCI Slack workspace for each group to communicate in. We also carefully chose the groups to have a range of experiences and backgrounds, and also decided to do all of the meeting scheduling for all the groups. And that was a heavy workload, and I don't recommend it. I stayed extremely involved in the Slack work. I would send scheduled reminders to Slack to complete certain assignments. I would speak at the beginning of sync classes to remind them that we were there, and generally enforce that I was there to support in any way that I could, even if it turned out that they didn't need me. I also stayed on top of facilitators and TAs for grading and meetings, and the instructors stayed largely separate from the process. So in a lot of ways, the group work was run by me as something of an educational manager. One thing I also did, especially when I joined during sync classes to just remind them of things coming up, was I was extremely enthusiastic. And that sounded more sarcastic than I meant it to, but it was genuinely very important for the students to know how excited we were about this work that they were doing and how invested we were in having it be a successful and rewarding experience for them. It was really important to me that they knew I wanted them to get something from this so that they didn't feel like they were just being shoved into group work because it was a thing that you do in classes. So this model that I have outlined with all of this support is not sustainable for models with little or no extra support, which would be true for both large and small class sizes. So we do want to keep that in mind, that all of that stuff I just said has sort of these extra little fun helpers. And on top of that, not everything worked. So like I said before, we had to kill a couple darlings and deal with some frustration. But largely it was a really rewarding experience. And it helped that we offered the help that we offered to students was incredibly appreciated. Now, considering that this is not always an accessible model for people, there are some really key takeaways that can come from this experience and can be applied to any type of group work. Sitting down and thinking through as many challenges as possible, down to the tiny little things like, do they need a Zoom space to facilitate their meetings? To big things like, what if one of the students vanishes during the class? Thinking through challenges doesn't require a big team and provides an opportunity to put yourself in the student's shoes. What would they consider an obstacle that you might not? There's a way to solve, there's not a way to, oh gosh, there's not a way to solve for everything ahead of time. And that is okay. And that's where flexibility and iteration come in. In subsequent iterations, you build on those lessons you learned, using it as part of the process and keeping the concept of pivoting as a potential strategy. And the other really important thing is showing the students from the instructor and from what support staff you may have that you are committed to the group work and it's important to you. You care about their success and their experience, and checking in provides emotional support for work that might otherwise be an added stressor. You may not be able to schedule all the meetings for them, and I would not recommend you do that anyways. But reminding to do that at the beginning of live classes, soliciting feedback on how the process is going, asking if there's something in particular that they enjoy, and expressing your own excitement over their work and their final product will do so much. You can also prove commitment to the work by providing dedicated class time to group work, though through, for example, breakout rooms. And in that situation, if there's enough time, hopping from room to check in and see how things are going, and if they have questions, can be a great way to engage. If you can, offering time outside of structured class to support them, such as meeting independently with each group or office hours where folks can stop by, is great. But if you can really only do what you have capacity for, it's thinking about the challenges and being passionate about the students' success, and also practicing slow breathing.
So as we finish the formal part of our presentation, we want to leave you with 3 questions to take away, to use in your own process of thinking through group work. So what processes have you found in the past that were valuable when you were designing group work? What challenges have you encountered before? And if you were to give advice to somebody else on how to overcome those challenges, what would that be? Think about this, that you can design this as if you were giving your own best advice to your younger self, if nothing else.
Thank you so much for listening to us. That ends the structured portion of our presentation. We recognize that we've gone a little bit long here and that there's not a lot of time for questions, but there might be time for one. And our contact information is here, and we are totally available and excited to talk online or offline or on Zoom or however you would like about group work strategies. All right. I don't see any questions in the chat. I do see a thanks in the chat, which I really appreciate.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
And thank you, Val, and thank you everybody else who has come to this. And here we have come to this, the end.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
So much.